And speaking of somebody else who's teleprompter free, he heads up LewRockwell.com. And by the way, his name is Lew Rockwell. He's the founder and head of the Von Mises Institute. He is also the former chief of staff for Congressman Ron Paul. He's an author and researcher and a true brain trust for liberty. And I want to thank him. I guess he's out there on the East Coast, I think, right now at 10:37 for joining us, 9:37 Central, to break down this giant puppet show. And I know we know that, but I want his take on where it's all going. Lew Rockwell, thank you so much for coming on, sir.
Alex, great to be with you.
Wow, so much is happening. I've got a million questions, but out of the gates, what is on Lew Rockwell's mind?
Well, it's interesting to me, and I guess we've known this for some time, that apparently Obama is the choice of the oligarchy to be the button on their lapel for the next 4 years. We shouldn't assume that the president actually is running things. He's being run. He's given a schedule every day that he follows. It's the oligarchy that runs things. So they've decided that they're better off with another 4 years of Obama than 4 years of Romney. These two men are really two peas in a pod. I mean, one is a fascistic socialist, the other is a socialistic fascist. But there really is not significant difference, except some of the interest groups that grow rich and powerful off their presidencies are different. I mean, that's true that some big pharma may do better under Romney, but maybe not. It does very well under Obama. Military-industrial complex certainly will do well under both of them. So this is all just a game. I mean, the Romans had their bread and circuses. We've got our elections and welfare system. So this is all just a trick. It's slightly discouraging to see how many Americans fall for it. Although we should always remember that far more Americans refuse to vote than vote either Republican or Democratic. Because they realize it's all a fraud. It's just a joke. Their vote makes no difference. It's a pain in the neck, of course, to go vote. And when you vote, you're sort of giving your endorsement to the whole system. So a huge number of Americans, perhaps 45% of the potential electorate, don't vote. So that's good news. But the majority of people are caught up in this. They think there's actually something to be achieved by having either Romney or Obama, when they both represent the same group of plutocrats and the oligarchy of government. Parties are different. As Gerald Celente would tell us, there's a difference between the Bonanos and the Gambinos. They really do fight each other. But for the rest of us, there's not too much of a difference. So the Republicans and Democrats, there's two wings of the same bird of prey, as Butler Schaefer always puts it.
I know that not only do you study economics, you study history. Again, if you're joining us listening on the radio, it's Lew Rockwell, LewRockwell.com. Obviously, TV viewers can see him right there on our screen, joining us via Skype. As a person who studied history, myself, I've decided to try to weather the storm, stay here in America. It's not perfect, but there's nowhere really to run. I mean, there's big government and tyranny all over the world. Unfortunately, the U.S. now has, fallen in the ranks to not one of the best places economically to live or politically. But what is your view on the future of America? I mean, privately, when you're sitting around, say, talking to Ron Paul, like you were a few weekends ago at your big event you guys had, where do you really see us going? And where do you see this ruling class going? Because we see all these court rulings saying we're going to come into your house and if the drug dog without a warrant smells drugs, we're going to randomly walk up and down your street, we're going to bust down your door. And we're going to put GPS on your car without a warrant. And we're going to pull you over and download your phone. And we're going to have the TSA download your laptop. And we're going to have the NSA spy on you without warrants. And we're going to put cameras in your backyard and watch you without warrants. I mean, it's absurdist how tyrannical it's getting, and it's just getting going fast. So what's happening to America? Where do you see it, Lew Rockwell?
Well, Alex, you're certainly right. This is a police state. It's not a Soviet or a Nazi police state yet, but it's headed in that direction. Especially if we consider what was the case just 15 or 20 years ago. There were many bad things that went on, but it's not like today. And of course, kill lists and the drones and the perpetual wars. So I think that there's tremendously bad things going on politically, but there's also the economic disaster. So I don't know when this whole system is going to come down. We've never had anything like the current economic system in the history of the world, where you have every single country with a central bank massively printing up fiat currency, increasing the money supply, doing everything for the banks. It's true in Europe, it's true here, it's true in Asia. They're all bankocracies, and the regular people are being ripped off for the benefit of the banks, but it's being done in such a way that it's going to have horrific economic consequences. So I think the short-term lookout for America, for Spain, for England, for France, for Japan, for countries all over the world is very bad. I do think that the human race has a good future. I think that mankind will end up triumphing over this, but I think we're going to have some very rough times, and I hope people are preparing themselves. We can take a look at what happened in Manhattan, and those people, some of those people were prepared, others weren't. We all have to be prepared in terms of whether it's a governmentally caused disaster or a natural disaster. That's important. It's important that you have some money out of the banks. It's important that you have gold and silver in your own possession. Other things you can do, you can cut down on your debts and that sort of thing. But these are difficult times. Professor Jack Douglas said that today that we're living in the lull before the social unrest is coming. So we have, I think, a lot of troubles ahead. On the other hand, the market is still great. Still many great entrepreneurs, many great working people. Many of the American people are still a great people. They've been brainwashed, they've been fooled, but they can come back. It is possible for people to change their minds. It is possible. We only have to look at the impact that Ron Paul had with the media shutting him out, demonizing him, smearing him, the Republican Party stealing all of those votes and so forth, because we wonder how many votes are being stolen on both sides tonight. But against all that, those odds, we saw what Ron Paul was able to do. There's a key, and Ron Paul and his sorts of ideas have an appeal all over the world, not just in this country.
Exactly. I mean, America used to be an example of freedom. Now it's become an example of tyranny. But people all over the world now can say, hey, Americans aren't bad. Look at Ron Paul. And by the way, right. I had lost contact with some of my contacts to Ron Paul. Thank you for getting Ron Paul in touch with us. He's on the show Friday. Lew.
Yeah, well, he's delighted to be on, and it's so great for you to have him on and for him to be on.
Oh, you bet. We're glad to have him. It's been a few months, like 3 or 4 or longer, since he's been on the show. Continuing here, I mean, I hate to sit here and just say bad news, bad news, bad news, but in my experience, it's not admitting how much trouble we're in that's gotten us into this. You talk about civil unrest. It's really two worlds. You've either got people that are more awake, working harder than ever, and more productive than ever, almost survival of the fittest, versus slobs everywhere. And let's be honest, they're out there. Zombie-like people, and then the predatory minions in government, and then the crony capitalists that feed at that. And clearly they're moving towards more authoritarianism because tyranny doesn't work. They're destroying the golden goose. So their answer is, don't go back to liberty. Let's just bring in pure tyranny. It's that same ham-fisted trait. Why do you think the establishment is going light speed towards tyranny? Is that a sign of their strength or a sign of their weakness?
Well, I think it's a sign of the nature of government. I think every government would like to be a totalitarian state if they can get away with it. And after 9/11, we saw a huge pullback by the American people in their opposition to government power. And throughout human history, we can look at it's always a battle between market and power, between the government and the coercive forces. In the private sector, we call them criminals, and we call them politicians, and when they work for the government, between those people and the productive people. So there are many great people in this country, as you point out. Many great people, I'll point out, in the underground economy, who do everything they can to stay away from government regulations, stay away from government in every sense. And they just add a tremendous amount to human productivity and human flourishing in this country. And again, great businessmen, great entrepreneurs. The market can't be actually put out of business by the government. Even the Soviet Union, even Mao Zedong's China, even Pol Pot's Cambodia could not put the market out of
And just to interrupt, because you're so right, I guess the government estimates 50 million people are out of the system. I think it's more. I know a lot of these really dynamic software engineers, business owners, and they have made the decision, even though it's harder for them to not be sucked off by parasites, that they are almost completely out of the system. And you notice this whole cashless society system that you've talked so much about, it is obsessed with shutting down the archetypes of the lemonade stands, the Amish, the people selling pumpkins, the people selling bonsai trees, the people selling handmade woodwork, the harassing the farmers markets. This whole new world order that's so big and bad, Lew, explain this to us. Why are they so scared to death of even little, small markets that aren't under their control?
Well, they're scared because they represent lies, and we represent the truth. And a little lemonade stand represents economic truth as versus the lies of the government. And there was just a recent report from the Federal Reserve taking great alarm at the vastly increasing number of Americans who are, as they put it, unbanked and non-banked. People who either are too poor to use banks or just don't want to, and other people who just don't want to use the banks. So it's one of the things we can all do if we want to strike back at the system that it's strangling us, strangling our liberties. Do everything you can to live outside the banks.
Yeah, I've thought about paying my employees.
Have something to do with the banks, but we don't have to keep all our money in the banks to get that, what, 1/8% interest or whatever they're paying us?
Sure. So why is the system so scared of cash? Like you said, they have billboards up all over the country now saying cash is dirty. Have you seen those?
No, I haven't, but I'm not surprised. But it's because the banking system is a fraudulent system. It's based on fractional reserves. Your money is not actually in there, so that it doesn't take very many customers trying to get their money out of the banks, that if they didn't get supplied by the Federal Reserve, they would go out of business. Every single bank in this country, no matter how big, how small, is actually bankrupt by normal business standards. They're kept in existence by the Fed, but they make their money, and they're all based on having as much money within the system that they can then pyramid on. So to the extent we take our money out of the banks, it hurts them. You only have to see what I'm talking about. Try to go take a couple $1,000s, let's say, out of your bank if you want to pay your bills in cash for some period of time. They treat you like a criminal. How dare you take your money out of the bank? They don't like it. So there's a signal that you ought to be doing it. So, and also you ought to be reading. I mean, one of the great advantages we have now is versus, say, under Franklin Roosevelt, when we had the first fascist American government. Far more Americans understand economics. Far more Americans understand real history. Far more Americans understand real principles of politics and political philosophy. They understand libertarianism and they understand anarchism, for that matter. So they're just far more Americans, especially among young people. Young people don't trust the government. They don't trust the establishment. When they see a typical professor get up in the classroom, they might as well have a little flashing sign on their forehead saying, liar, liar. Because, of course, they don't believe these people. They're looking for the truth. They're finding the truth, by the way. I'm very optimistic about the younger generation, the Ron Paul generation. It's quite something. So us older people, maybe we're for the most part lost, but that's not true as you go down the age spectrum. So there's real change.
I was about to say, real change. I've seen the numbers as you have. We're not just hyping this. If you look at young people who the media claims are a bunch of idiots and don't know anything, those that are politically aware are really getting it, that you can't trust the system. They don't like the government. In fact, we've gone out and interviewed people, and so have other reporters. Even Obama supporters know he's horrible now. They just say, well, he's better than Romney. And sure, Republicans say, we know Romney's bad, he's better than Obama. But at least Democrats, who are usually, as you know, extremely cult-like, they now at least don't think Obama is the second coming of Christ.
And of course, as you always point out, these are artificial divisions, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, and so forth, that they, black, white, male, female, worker, capitalist, and so forth. These are all artificial distinctions that are put out by the government in order to split us up, so that in order to divide and rule, the same reason they want to break up Iraq or Syria or Iran or whatever. It's the old imperial principle of divide and rule, and it, of course, applies to the people they're most concerned with controlling, and that's the American people. They're afraid of us. They don't trust us. They don't like us. They want to, of course, they want to have us as their milk cows.
Wow, that's true. What you just said is deep. I want you to elaborate on that. You know, some good old boys are like, oh, we're going to get free oil from Iraq, as if the globalists are going to give you oil they steal. But I mean, speaking to the American people, if the New World Order hates wild, you know, Afghans because they can't be controlled, imagine how much they hate us. And I've read the writings, as you have, of different collectivists and globalists. They've always said we're the target to take down. Don't people get that? That socialism does not work and delivers hell on earth? I mean, it is such an easy thing to understand.
Well, it's true, and of course, it's why actually, maybe they've actually learned something. It's tough to believe the people, the elite and the government have actually learned something, but it's really why they prefer fascism today than communism, because fascism is slightly more economically productive than communism and gives, therefore, them more money to live it up. Because, of course, they want to live it up. But the thing we always have to keep in mind is that the power elite is necessarily a tiny minority. And those of us who are being ripped off by them, who are being ruled by them, lied to by them, oppressed by them, felt up by them at the airport, and all the rest of the things the government does to us, we are the vast majority. We don't have to put up with it. So that the more that we learn ourselves, the more that we talk to others, the more we read, the more we become beacons of liberty ourselves, and people are drawn to us, and they become beacons of liberty. This is very much feared by the government. It wouldn't seem that this great fortress of government could be threatened, but they are threatened by the truth. They're threatened by people who are productive and don't believe them, who don't give them their consent, who withhold their consent, who are loyal to their God and to their family and to their business, to their neighborhood and their community and other organizations in private society, not to the government. Government, of course, wants us to be loyal only to it, and therefore to the
that was my next question.
Controls the government.
I've got a great crew, and I do have some good moments, but overall, I find my show, except when I have great guests on, you know, unlistenable at times. But still, because it is organic and isn't teleprompter controlled and is real, it grows by leaps and bounds, just like Ron Paul has been growing. This broadcast is now on. The latest numbers coming in, probably over 140 AM and FM stations. And that's a lot with this message. And a lot of them are big stations now. And the message is getting #1 ratings in many cities, you know, even up against mainline neocon types. And so I'm now at the point of realizing, wow, freedom is popular, like Ron Paul and you have said. And so my point here is we've got so many good things that are happening, but so many bad things. But I see the move towards censorship, the cybersecurity, the fairness doctrine. It's got to make the system mad that they can spend $300, $400 million a year to run MSNBC, and for $5.5 million, I can run something. This isn't hype. If you go to Alexa.com, if you go to Google Analytics, we have more listeners than MSNBC with its million top show. We have 3 million during the radio show. We have 1 million plus people coming to the websites a day, and it's growing. All totaled 15 million a week. And that's an example of freedom and free market. 5.5 million versus 300 million. And they've got these giant fancy sets and thousands of crew members, and they cannot get the hearts and minds. I'm just waiting for everybody else to come in for the big victory against these slobs. Because, you know, if my dumb ass can be kicking their butt, what can, you know, the really powerful people that I know are out there do if they'll just start thinking of themselves as leaders, Lew?
Well, Alex, of course, you've got a tremendous audience, and they do fear you. They fear anybody who's speaking the truth. They fear anybody who's not going along with the party line and pretending that, oh, we want the Republicans instead of the Democrats, or the Democrats instead of the Republicans, and the rest of the lies they tell us. So, again, we can never forget we have the truth on our side, and as bad as things are right now, imagine if we were serfs in the days of the Pharaoh, when the government was exactly the way they like it to be. God, that's what they would like. They would like the government is actually God. So they always are in competition with God. It's why they don't like religion. It's why they don't like families. They're in competition with anything that stands, as the late Robert Nisbet, the great libertarian sociologist, pointed out, anything that stands between the naked individual and the state. They hate churches. They hate businesses. They hate radio shows like yours. They hate the family. They hate the neighborhood. They hate, and so they want to break all this down.
They hate anything organic.
Well, they do, but you know what? There's a revolution coming, an intellectual revolution, More and more people are saying they're not going to put up with it. More and more people are learning. Ron Paul always says that really people like us are born libertarians. We're born loving freedom, and so that the whole process is a matter of discovery for us. It's not so much a process of conversion. And again, we only need a minority. Everything for good or ill is done by motivated minorities. We only need a minority. We already have a tremendous minority.
A motivated minority to set brush fires in the minds of men, as Thomas Jefferson said, if I'm paraphrasing the right founding fathers. But getting back to my little rant, my question to you is, at what point have they gotten to? Because if you look at mainstream media, as you know, 10 years ago, before they had real competition, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, they were dominant. They're still playing the old game. Have they figured out yet that intellectually, with people that can actually tie their shoelaces, they've already lost?
Well, I think they're concerned. And although they still pretend that we're all being run by the New York Times or the Washington Post or the these other antique mediums, so that they live in the past. They are afraid. They revel in their power. I also think they tend to be crazy. I mean, I think there's a crazy gene in these people. We're not meant. Man is not meant to rule over others like that. It's not. It's not a natural thing. It's not a good thing. No normal, decent person wants to do that. But the people who have what St. Augustine called the libido dominante, the lust to rule, the perverted desire for power over others and to rule others, there's something crazy about them. It's not only are they evil, they're crazy. So we have sanity on our side as well as the truth. So I think they're right to be worried. I think that I always think of the analogy as, think of the people as like a huge dog, and those guys are like a bunch of fleas, and they're on the dog, they're sort of running the dog, but every moment they're afraid the dog's going to scratch them off. And you know what? The dog can scratch them off. So I think the future can be very bright, even though there's some serious economic troubles coming in the interim. But when I look at that younger generation, or when, Alex, I look at the size of your audience, I can't help but feel hopeful for the future.
Absolutely. In closing, in the 5 minutes we've got left with Lew Rockwell, LewRockwell.com, it is so important for viewers out there to spread the word about LewRockwell.com or Campaign for Liberty or Infowars.com or PrisonPlanet.com, because it is your power. Voting with your time and energy, spreading the word. You already know this stuff. Who have you reached today? That's why I've put the magazine out. We put over 100,000 of them out a month now, and that's just the beta test. And when I go to the park or I go to a business or I go to get my hair cut, I keep hundreds in my vehicle. And even though I'm already putting 80,000 on the streets of Austin, mailing out 30,000 to listeners, I still drop them everywhere because it's a real pleasure, almost a ritual, to plant those seeds doing this, because it's fun to sabotage the tyrants, because the tyrants, they count on us just going along and feeling powerless. Let me ask you this. Why are you concerned about civil unrest? What do you see happening economically in the short and mid and long-term future, briefly? And then I want to ask you one final question. Why were you saying you think the establishment has chosen Obama? You can take either question in order.
Well, I think, first of all, I'm afraid if we have the kind of economic troubles we're going to have, if we have an actual demise of the dollar, of the federal treasury bonds, of the whole apparatus, the banking system and so forth, which is, I think, on very loose legs at the moment, and they continue, of course, to print the money, do things that are unimaginably disastrous from an economic standpoint. When there's a crash and something that makes 2008 look like a picnic, I think just as in any economic crisis, there can be civil unrest. There can be people who decide that they want to eliminate the middleman, the government, and just go ahead and take it directly. Because of course the government acts as a thief, the thief in chief for a whole lot of recipients. When those recipients are not getting their checks anymore, or when those checks don't buy anything, then I think we have to worry about civil unrest. It's also why it's important for every honest person to be armed, for every woman to be armed, for every man to be armed, and know how to use their guns.
That is the great object. That is the great object.
Why did they pick Obama? Because they feel that he's better for them. He can fool people more effectively than Romney. That's one of the key things these guys have to do. They have to fool people for the plutocracy. So they feel, and I don't know what calculus goes into it entirely, but they feel that Obama can keep the game going longer than Romney might have been able to, because people maybe saw Romney as himself a plutocrat, and they see Obama. This is ridiculous, of course, because Obama was also a member of the power elite, of course. But a lot of people see him as like a regular guy who made good, whereas they think of Romney in a different way. So I think the fact that Romney was so wealthy and made his money, maybe a lot of it legitimately, maybe a lot of it not legitimately. Of course, Goldman Sachs was his big backer. But
it plays into the class warfare narrative. By the way, Obama, they're now calling California for Barack Hussein Obama. He's got 244 electoral votes in the puppet college versus 193 against Mitt Romney. So I guess your prediction's coming true here right in front of us. I don't see much of a chance now. If he gets, what's 44 to 70? How many is that? 20 and then 6. 26 more electoral votes, and Barack Obama is in for 4 more years. What do you expect Obama to do with 4 more years?
Well, I hope he's not going to bomb Iran. I mean, maybe that's the one thing that we might say good about him as versus Romney. He has seemed more reluctant to bomb Iran, whereas Romney probably would have done that like the first day he was in office. He's a very bloodthirsty guy. Not that Obama isn't bloodthirsty, because they're both bloodthirsty, but maybe Obama's just a slight bit less so.
He knows to knock old ladies on the head militarily, not go start a fight with a junkyard dog.
No, and also he's going to do more rewarding of big pharma, which is what Obamacare is. It's rewards to the big hospital complex, the big doctor complex, especially the big drug complex, who actually wrote Obamacare, the drug companies, or at least the parts of it that apply to the pharmaceutical industry. So he's going to do that. He's going to do more regulating. And by the way, every time, whatever their excuse is, whenever there are new regulations, some new government action, somebody is making a huge amount of money out of it. You may not be able to see it right away who it is. They're not doing this for the public good or for the poor or whatever their excuses are. George Soros or the other oligarchs who are in back of Obama will do very well from the next 4 years, just as the oligarchs in back of Romney would have done very well if he'd been in office. But I think they all made the decision that it should be Obama, that they're better off with Obama. That's all they care about. Of course, they couldn't care less about us except to fear us and to want to loot every dime from us that they possibly can.
Well said, and that was answering my question of what they'll do in the next 4 years. I was now forgetting the one final question. Lew Rockwell, thank you so much for the time tonight. Of all the questions I've posed here, are there any other points you think are important to our audience out there watching?
Alex, I just want to congratulate you on the show tonight and on everything else you do. You are indeed having a real impact, and it's
Well, Lew, we want to thank you. You're having a real impact, and I don't want to sound like I'm bragging the show's getting bigger. It's actually humbling. If just little old me can have an effect like this, imagine what others can do, like you've been doing. And Ron Paul, I think the message is get out there. And Ron Paul said this in 2003 at a speech he gave in Austin, Texas, that I videotaped and put in a film I made called Matrix of Evil. And he said, look, the big challenge in the next 10 to 15 years, and boy was he prescient, will be when they collapse things. And he said it will collapse because of derivatives and the dollar and all the rest of it. Mm-hmm. Will the collectivist be able to pose as saviors and act like they didn't do this and bring in total tyranny, or will we get the word out now so that people understand there's an alternative? And I'd like you to spend 2 minutes closing on that, Lew. I know it's late at night. We appreciate your time. But, I mean, Ron Paul, I'm not just saying this. I've studied politics. I've studied economics. I've studied history. People say, oh, that's that mean free market thing. That'll do this and that. Look, socialism and collectivism doesn't deliver. But, I mean, how did Ron Paul, I know you spoke about this too, so, prescient, 10 years ago.
He is indeed prescient. He's also the great communicator. Forget Ronald Reagan. Ron Paul is the great communicator. And he's been able to communicate economic truths and historical truths, political truths, in a way that I've never seen before. But again, we we do have the truth on our side, and we are, all of us, you, of course, Ron, are doing such a great job of spreading this truth, and it's having a tremendous effect. So we're making the bad guys fear us. That's good. They're continuing with all their stuff. They're like the big army with all their divisions marching into battle, like the British maybe in the time of George III. We're the guerrillas, but we don't have to have as many soldiers as the big guys do because we're faster, we're smarter, maybe we're better, sharpshooters with our ideas, and we're able to pinpoint what's wrong with the government, what's wrong with the current economic system, and why the free market is best. I'll just leave with this one point. We've had this horrible gasoline shortage when people need gasoline so desperately for their cars and for their generators in New Jersey and in New York and Connecticut and so forth. So what did the government do? It actually caused a shortage by introducing these so-called anti-price gouging laws. So at a time when gasoline is worth far more, and people, of course, are happy to pay far more for it, the government says you can't charge more, you have to charge the old price. And so that caused a shortage because the actual market price was much higher than what the price the gasoline stations were able to use. So they caused such havoc. I noticed on MSNBC they were always talking about this disaster of Sandy shows why we need government. Well, what exactly has government done except, of course, loot people, strung around in uniforms telling us how great they are, telling us how important government is, and otherwise making everything worse, taking this horrific disaster of Sandy and making it much, much worse for all regular people, whether it's on Staten Island or in New Jersey or wherever else it is. So this is government. This is the people
I'm glad you raised that point because
they crush people.
Exactly. They say you can't, have but 3 people in a car. You've got to do all these rules. That was one question I actually had written down. I never got to. Whether it's Katrina or Sandy, it's the churches and individuals that got ready that they admit that are keeping society going, and government's not even anywhere to be seen. My listeners in Long Island and in Staten Island have called in, and I've seen it in the news. The cops, they've ordered them to be out there writing tickets for people running red lights that don't have power to them. I mean, that just shows the total disconnect of government.
And I noticed there was a case in Piedmont, Oklahoma today of a cop who gave a $2,500 ticket to a mother because her 3-year-old little boy peed in his own front yard.
Yeah, I saw that.
$2,500. So, these people are out of control. But the more they do this sort of thing, the more they lose the support of the American people, the more the opposition grows. And there's great stuff going on under the surface. And I just hope that people learn from things like Katrina or from what FEMA has done in this disaster with Sandy as well as in Katrina. They just make everything worse. I remember in Katrina when the government was going to get everybody bags of ice. So what happened was they had these vast warehouses full of what turned out to be bags of water. And after the Katrina disaster, they invited Walmart to come and explain to FEMA how they were able to get bags of ice in their stores without any trouble. Well, of course, the market can do it. Private property can do it. People with a profit motive can do it. This is capitalism. Of course they can get the ice to the people who need it. It's just a good thing there wasn't an ice price control. If they said, well, you can't sell the ice for more than what you used to be able to sell it, then they would have stopped it. So, but this is government. Everything they do is damaging. Everything they do, it makes trouble. They want more and more of our money. They want more and more control over us. They want to be able to kill us if they'd like to without saying a boo to anybody else. That's what they want. They're a vicious and a parasitical bunch. But the majority of people are decent people. They care about their own families. They care about their work, care about their neighborhoods, their churches, and they want to build something for their children. The government is taking away not only their livelihoods, but their children and their grandchildren's livelihoods. We all know our children face worse futures than we've had. So that's why people are waking up. Alex, thanks for everything you did to wake people up. And I'll tell you, it's working.
Well, Lew, please don't thank me. Thank you for helping wake myself and so many others up. We'll talk to you again as soon as you can join us. Thank you so much for the work you're doing over at LewRockwell.com and the Von Mies Institute. And we'll be talking to Ron Paul on Friday. Thanks to your help. God bless you.
Thank you, Alex.